We are officially in the doldrums of the offseason. Doesn't necessarily feel like it right now because we had a basketball press conference today. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about that on Wednesday. But we are in the offseason for both football and basketball. There's no spring ball. We're into recruiting and all of that. And you have questions as we get into our post-spring Michigan Mailbag on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Always a good sign when I start losing my voice in the intro. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Where's your team every day? I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire, the USA Today Sports Media Group. Just realizing that I did not order things correctly here in the Michigan Mailbag, but we are getting back to it here. And let's go ahead and start with our leaders and best, starting with James Crudup at James Crudup 6. Which program will have more success over the next 5 years, basketball or football? I'm going to go with basketball, and this isn't a knock on Sharon Moore. I just think that it's gotten, I understand the Big Ten's grown in both sports. I think it's gotten a lot harder in football. And it does not seem like Michigan's recruiting is necessarily, I think that it's great to be a developmental school. But you look at, what you have on the roster right now in football. You have, I think they can still be very good. They've got 4 guys projected to go in the first round of the NFL draft next year. They had one guy obviously go last year with 13 overall. I think you're going to see maybe not quite as many players, but maybe something like 9 or 10 or something coming out of this year. So, but after that, I don't have any obvious answers. Now, as long as they get some hits on some of those guys that are, those tweeners, the Dominic Nichols of the world, the Devin Baxters, the Brady Prescorns and such like that, they need to have a hit rate like we talked about last week. With this class that they just had in the same way that they did with 2018, and same thing with the class before it, right? So that's kind of the issue is that I feel like basketball with Dusty May. I mean, Dusty May is just very impressive, and it just feels to me like he's going to get it figured out. He's already done an incredible job really building a roster that looks like it could honestly. I mean, we'll see it. We'll see for sure once they actually hit the court. Right, because you look at the roster last year, it didn't necessarily look great, but you looked at it and said maybe, and then the first couple games you're like, here we go, and then it falls apart the way you expect it to. But this feels like a roster that's not only good from the starting 5, it feels like it's got depth, and that's been one of the issues the last several years, right? Like last year, that was the issue basketball wise, was you had to keep basically the starting 5 out on the court most of the game because the guys coming in outside of Will Shetter, it just didn't feel very good, right? You're going to Trey Jackson. It's like, ooh, that's not a great scenario. Jalen Llewellyn was a clear step down from Doug McDaniel, and that doesn't necessarily say a lot of good things. It just didn't feel like a team that had a lot going for it. It felt like a better team than the 2007 version that John Beilein ran. It doesn't take a lot to do that. That was a depressing team. Deshaun Sims. Right? Like that was a sad team. So I think that basketball, though, it just feels like Dusty May knows what he's looking for. He just feels like when he talks the X's and O's and everything, he just feels way sharper than Juwan. And that's not a knock on Juwan. It's more of a praise for Dusty May. So I just think it's going to be a lot harder for football, even with the playoff expanding, because Ohio State is recruiting the way it is. USC, Oregon, all of those schools are recruiting the way that they are. And basketball is just, there's always going to be a little bit more of a level playing field there. They can jump right back into this thing really fast. Josh Barr at Jadicke, out of all the guys on the title winning team, are there any that you think likely follows in the footsteps of the many members of the coaching staff and end up back at Michigan as a coach in the future? Definitely. I don't know that I have any obvious examples because a lot of them we'll see how they do in the NFL. But I mean, I could see like a Blake Corum coming back and being a coach, although I could also see him going off and doing philanthropic things. I don't think JJ McCarthy he doesn't seem like a Jim Harbaugh type in terms of like, he's very similar to Jim in all ways, but for some reason, I just don't see him dedicating his life to coaching once it's all said and done. But maybe people wouldn't have believed you about Jim Harbaugh in that light. Yeah, I could definitely see a guy like Cornelius, who's just very cerebral, being a coach at the next level. But I don't have any really good picks here. I know I asked this on for a call for questions on Thursday last week, and we're just getting to it Tuesday, thanks to some ailments. But you and I, who talked off of this, wish it would have been a Kendrick Lamar Drake question. I am all in on this Kendrick Drake beef thing. It is scintillating. Next mailbag. You're the one who would answer the questions better than me. Let's just be clear with that. Jimmy Whitner at Jimmy Whitner 1. What are you looking forward to most in the 2024 season? Honestly, all the big games. I don't know if I have here's what I'm looking for from Michigan. You just hope it looks the same, and you hope that the quarterback play is competent. But you want to see the trenches obviously do really well. But I think ultimately seeing Texas at the Big House, doing the road trip to Washington. I'm not excited about a midweek West Coast trip, but maybe I think I'm getting over my fear of flying, so I think that might not be so bad. Usually, 3 hours is fine for a trip, but 5 hours feels like a long one. I mean, I got used to flying to and from California, but I got unused to it. And then got used to my little Orlando trips that are 2 hours. I think just having having USC come to the Big House, Texas come to the Big House, Oregon come to the Big House, that's just huge, right? Those are big marquee teams. You just hope that Michigan can beat some of them in a year where it seems a little less certain. Oregon's really reloaded. Texas still has Quinn Ewers, USC. They don't necessarily look great. And Ohio State, we'll see what happens in Columbus, but that would be that. Number 2, if you had to pick the starting QB today, who would you pick? I would still pick Alex Orji because I just still think that he's dynamic. And the problem is I feel like you hope that you wish you had a couple more games to work with him before you got to that Texas game, because you've got Fresno State, then Texas, then you've got Arkansas State, then USC. So there's not much wiggle room. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's Jack Tuttle, because he might feel like he's got a little bit more of a handle on things, but I would pick Alex Orji as of right now. Number 3, looking back at the 23 season, which game did you enjoy the most? The Rose Bowl. If you're going all games, it was the Rose Bowl. The national championship game did not have the same gravitas. It didn't feel. It was bizarre. Maybe it was because it just felt very surreal. I was not looking as forward to the Rose Bowl as a lot of Michigan fans were. And it was once I finally was on the grounds, which wasn't my first time there. I've talked to you about seeing UCLA, Oregon State there some years ago. It just felt different, right? Just all of the pomp and circumstance and all of it. Seeing Alabama on the other side of the field in a more meaningful game than when I saw them in the Citrus Bowl in 2019. The Rose Bowl was by far the game. Obviously, otherwise it'd be Ohio State. Jonathan Joseph at JJoseph2156. How boring is it to cover OSU and MSU that they also, quote, cover Michigan? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. But yeah, they also cover Michigan, and that kind of sucks because it's any big dropping story, they're going to have the same big dropping story, but we do the same for those two. I don't really obviously cover Ohio State and Michigan State that much, right? You pay attention, and if there's something that's pertinent or something really bad that happens, that's more of something Michigan fans can have fun with, then, we cover that. It's not, I'm not going to look into, the, big institutional systemic foibles, right? Like the Larry Nassers of it all. That's not something that I think is worth making light of. Don't twist my words, rival fans that are watching this. I'm saying I wouldn't do something like that because that's abhorrent to try to, hey, let's try to get Michigan fans to on a superiority click there. No, the superiority click is only it's like, I think of Brendan Rice after Mel Tucker left Colorado for Michigan State, and he was recruited by Michigan, and then he had a tweet saying the best players in Michigan go to Michigan, and that's the type of thing, right? It's all about having fun, not the Schadenfreude of real life circumstances. But yeah, that's all I got there. Finishing us out in segment 1, Spencer Whitmore at Spencer Whitmore, and he's got a whole "it's gonna be Dusty May" thing, and I'm not gonna read it like that. Obviously, this was meant for May 3rd, which was already a little past. But he said, sorry, I had to say it. Any fun summer travel plans? Nothing set in stone. Sarah and I have talked about touring the state of Michigan a little bit. Whenever we talk about like Traverse City and stuff, she's like, oh, that's whatever. I don't really like it. And I'm like, how can you not like it? It's exactly the type of style of town that you love. So like going in the summer. And so she's like, maybe. And she's like, but it's like 6 hours away. I'm like, it is not 6 hours away. And then she looked up. She's like, you're right. It isn't that far away. I'd like to go to Mackinac Island. I've never been there. And we've talked a couple times going to South Haven, Saugatuck, Grand Haven, all of that. So we might do something like a weekend trip here or there. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But really, it's just Michigan. I'm going to see what Michigan does if they do go to the White House, Washington, D.C., and all of that. But otherwise, mostly just sticking around here, it sounds like. So, all right. We're going to move on. We've got plenty more coming up here, and we're going to get to those all in just a moment. Before we do, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So play smartly. Find that ringer, put $5 on it, get $150 to play with. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. My apologies for not having a Friday episode, which was supposed to be this. I got in my head somewhere that it was Saturday or Sunday on Friday. Missed some radio appearances as well. They called. I didn't answer because I was like, what's this number? It's the weekend, whatever. It wasn't the weekend. And then I came down with yet another ailment. I get a lot of weird ailments. I'm not going to discuss this one. Just another weird ailment. And coming off of the whole bad back scenario, which I didn't go to the doctor for. I don't have health insurance right now. When I bought the house, I had to give up my health insurance. Well, I didn't have to. I just didn't want to make things tighter by paying $400 for something that didn't cover anything. And but this time I had to go and do some rounds of doctor's stuff. So we're finally back. Yesterday I took off after just kind of having a lot of stuff going on, but trying to get the yard work done that I didn't get done and all of that. But nonetheless, we are back and we are doing this. So we are on to the Victor's Valiant. I almost forgot what it was. Starting with, haven't seen this face in a while, Jim at Jim in the North. Did you like the Bad Batch ending? I did, but at the same time, it's just, I think back to it. I watched it, I think, twice. I think it was just once, and then maybe it felt like twice, because I always watch Star Wars Explained after. Like, I watched the recap afterwards. Because Bad Batch is the type of show that I'm not necessarily paying, like, super close attention to when it's on. I'm kind of watching, and maybe I'm, like, checking Instagram or Twitter or something like that at the same time. So there's always stuff that I miss. But, it was good, and the show was good. I wanted it to be a little deeper. But, I thought the way it ended, especially with Omega and being, more grown up, and Hunter and kind of looking after her the way he does, I thought it was pretty cool. But I still wanted a little more climactic of a moment, but maybe that's because I wasn't watching it intently enough for it to be built up enough. Number 2, why does Michigan always seem to roll over and show their belly? Cheeseburger Gate, the suspensions from the Big Ten based on accusations. We never go to the mattresses. I'm surprised because, the things that Michigan, like, I was very clued in. I was talking to multiple regents. I was talking to other higher-end people inside the organization. I was having, that time of the Connor Stallion stuff, I was just all in all day. And everything I had heard was like, they are going to the mattresses. But then literally the first moment that they could roll over, they did. And it was kind of surprising, right? Like a lot of the stuff I was putting out there, going to war, the Lord of the Rings memes and stuff like that, that wasn't even coming directly from me. I was like, I'm echoing the things that I've heard, and then they rolled over at the first sign of everything. So I don't know. It's just institutional at this point. Number 3, will Michigan continue to be as physical and or more on offense? I mean, you have to imagine that that's where it really, Ed Warner made the offensive line finally good for the first time in a decade. But it was under Moore that it took everything to the next level. His calling card is smash. So I would imagine, yes, it would be shocking if it wasn't, to be honest. Anything can change, but that's kind of his hallmark is physicality. So I would imagine that would continue. Mark Z at Mark Zemke, have you had a chance to listen to any Chargers podcasts like Locked On Chargers or the team-sponsored podcast? It's been so interesting to relive the past few years over again. All these people are just learning about Harbaugh, and they're all believers. It's a trip because it's a nearly word for word what you've been saying for years, but now it's for the Chargers. Side note, I'm a lifelong Chargers fan, so this is as good as it gets for me. I haven't. I don't really go outside of the immediate ecosphere, outside of maybe some national shows like Josh Pate, who we obviously, I thank again for coming on the show last week. I'll occasionally, I'd say not as much at this time of year, but I'll check in on Clayton Anthony and Chris Ballas's show on Mondays. So not a lot going there. I listen to some political podcasts, some Christian podcasts, but no, I haven't checked that out. But that's really fun. That's really fun to hear, and I can see how that would be enjoyable. We're going to get more about this next topic, but we'll touch on it here. John Diadamo at John Diadamo. Any intel on the Michigan-Kentucky recruiting situation? There isn't a recruiting situation, right? Yeah, they've gotten multiple guys to flip. That's not unusual. It's been kind of the case. Deion Walker was a guy who went there. DeAndre Square. Michigan wasn't that big on DeAndre Square. He had a Michigan offer, but they've long kind of gotten guys. Obviously, feels a little bit worse because you lose DJ Waller there. Feels like you're going to get Marquise Davis, and he ends up going there. It's not a situation. It's just particularly what's his name, Vance Marrow. He's a really good recruiter. There's a reason why he was rumored to come to Michigan. I'll never forget when he slid into my DMs, getting all mad at me once about it just over a year ago, when it seemed like he threw some shade at Michigan, and I wrote an article about it, and he was like, "How dare you?" So that's fun, but no, there's not really a situation. It's just they're in the SEC. They've got some resources. They're kind of that scrappy program. You're going to lose some here and there. Shane at Seamus0914. I don't know why I'm struggling to read your name. You're in this show every week. Are you surprised by the lack of portal additions to this point? No, not really. Last year was a little bit of an aberration by them getting like 9 guys. Usually it's been like 3 or 4. So that's kind of what they got. CJ Charleston at wide receiver. Maran Walker is back in the fold. Then you've got Jayshon Barham and Josh Preeb. And then the kicker, Dominic Zavada. That's about, I think that covers everybody. That's what you kind of expect Michigan to get, and I'm sure they'll add 1 or 2 more. I know things have changed, but they didn't lose. They lost, I think it was like 17 guys that they ended up losing overall, and about a half or a little more than half of those guys were not scholarship guys. So it's not necessarily it's not that big of a thing. I think that they're kind of right where they're supposed to be scholarship-wise. I couldn't tell you the actual numbers. But I think that you'll probably see 1 or 2 more guys come. Maybe you'll see 1 or 2 more guys leave. Maybe then they add 1 or 2 more. But I think they're about what you would expect for Michigan at this point. Clark at Blue for Life 8. Is Maran Walker coming back to play cornerback or receiver? I haven't talked to anyone directly about this, so I'm going to defer to some of those out there now. A bunch of people, like I wrote, he could play either side of the ball. Then you saw a lot of people saying he's committing as a wide receiver, but then Chris Ballas had a write-up where he says that he could play either side of the ball. So I'm going to keep it that way because they need potentially cornerback depth as much as they need wide receiver depth. Not as much, but close. So I think that it's possible that he ends up either side. Also, it kind of depends on who they get. If they can find a wide receiver that works out, or, then maybe they move him back to defense. They find a defensive back that they really want, and then maybe he's solidified as a wide receiver. So Perry Mitchell at Perry Mitchell 08. If Davis Warren takes the starting job, what does the Alex Orji package look like compared to last year? I can't imagine that they don't get him on the field in some capacity. It might look about the same, but you might see him throw more, I would say. And it goes even if Jack Tuttle's the starter, right? You don't forget about him. But yeah, I think you get Alex Orji on the field because he's a guy that can do some things. And maybe he ends up splitting time. who knows? When I say splitting time, I'm talking maybe 50-50. Who knows what they kind of conjure up that's going to work? They might find a formula that seems completely antithetical to everything we talk about, and it might work. Sometimes that happens. The Rican Raider at Hamstand 87, do we give Michigan NIL flowers for roster retention or no? Because it sure seems like they stepped up. Also, can you wind Zuri up on the camera for fun? We can try. Zuri! Zuri, thunder out there, so as soon as I say that. All right, here she comes. As far as NIL, I do believe that, they did a great job, especially when you consider how much people were... Come here. Come up here. Come here. You can kind of get her in the frame here. There's some puppy love. You want to turn at the camera? Okay. For those listening, I am so sorry, but there is a puppy here suddenly. But I think that when you hear, and I've heard of some of the, not any hard numbers or anything like that, but you hear just how much people have been trying to go after every big player on Michigan's roster, the dollar amounts that are rumored, the specific players I've heard. Yeah, I mean, I think that retaining them in this culture of college football speaks well to the Michigan culture, and also speaks well to NIL. They went all in on NIL. And I know people say that they haven't because they're not doing pay for play, and they're still not necessarily at the same level as a lot of other schools are at this point. But I mean, they did enough, and that's important. Now you just got to keep building on it is the important thing. Puppy's still here, but she's done with the camera. I'm not the one at William Cawthorne 9. Why did they change the Locked On opening? This because it's always time to change things up and modernize. Still using it at the old one at the end just for the sake of consistency. The new one doesn't really fit for an outro. What chance do you give the team to repeat? Pretty low, to be honest, just because there's a lot of other teams with a lot of, Ohio State went all in and has like a powerhouse roster. Now, I don't necessarily think that they're any tougher. I don't think they've fixed their problems, but if just with the overload of skill position players, if they manage in Columbus to overcome Michigan, then, maybe that gives them a better chance to actually get there, because we've seen that what they've done has not necessarily worked for Michigan, but it almost worked against Georgia. And it should have worked against Georgia, right? So I would say it's like a 10% that Michigan repeats. There's just a lot of really good teams that are stacked. Texas is stacked. Oregon's stacked. I mean, but we'll see. Michigan might be more stacked than I think it is, to be honest. If you could give your input on the current team, what would it be? I think you mean to the current team or on, because obviously we give the input on the current team literally every day on the show. My input to the current team would just be whatever you did last year, you're going to have to, it's kind of the Jim Harbaugh thing. If you want to get a little better at something, work a little harder at it. Well, you're going to have to do that even harder because the target's on your back more. You've lost some of those star players that really help propel you, like JJ and Mikey Sainristil and Blake Corum. So you've got to everyone's got to step up like 25% from what it was before. And you're going to have to scrape and claw in order to get it again. Finishing us out in segment 2, Jay Ricci at JMish99. I'm thinking Jack Tuttle might surprise us all and be the starting QB. How much would that surprise you? It wouldn't surprise me. As pointed out to me by some people inside Michigan, Jack Tuttle, even though he did have a little starting stint at Indiana, didn't look that great then. Looked certainly better in backup role out of Michigan. He was a former 4-star who had to sit behind Michael Penix Jr., a first-round draft pick, and J.J. McCarthy, a first-round draft pick. So, makes sense why he's been on the bench for so long. All right, we are going to continue on. We've got a bunch more. We're going to lightning round it here in just a moment. But before we do, all right, game off. We got to pause here, talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, Flag on the Play. You've already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together, build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's just so much more to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it right now at Google Play or the App Store. Game on. We always go overboard on this show and have like a ton of questions at the end, but we have to lightning round them, so that's where we're at. Gbead at 11. Gbead at Gbead at Gbead 1124. I don't know. I'm adding extra ats here. It's not an email address. Long time listener, first time asking a question. Well, welcome. Glad to have you. Do you feel like Michigan is falling behind from a talent perspective due to a lack of recruiting / kids getting NIL deals elsewhere? They're a 10-win team this year, but 2025 and beyond is starting to become very concerning. Go Blue. I think you got to wait and see who those depth pieces are, right? Okay, number one, you need a quarterback. That fixes a lot of issues. But right now, I know I have a depth question coming up. But that's like one of the key things is having those players that you know are the next guys, the next men up. And I think that, if you have some hits on some mid-level 4-star guys or even 3-star guys where it's like, okay, that's a starter, like a Rod Moore who was a 3-star. It became evident by end of his freshman season that guy is a starter next year. If you have that and you have a lot of those guys, then you're like, okay, that feels okay, right? That guy is better than many thought. Because remember, as much as recruiting services have their rankings, it's not always an exact science, and Michigan has tended to really develop better. They get more out of their lesser players and less out of their higher end players than a lot of other schools. So I think, yes, build off of this. And then the transfer portal makes it so that you can change things in a hurry. He finishes out Go Blue. So I will at least read you that. Next. I don't know what just happened. We get into segment 3 and I'm ready for a nap or something. Maybe it's because I'm distracted petting this dog that I called in here from her comfy seat on the couch, and the thunder that just happened made her all that more likely to come over and want to get attention. Give me more at DMichael022. Did you go to school there? If you're referring to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, yes, I did. I started in 1999, and I dropped out in 2000 without dropping my classes, so basically failed out. I just stopped going after like the first 3 weeks. Except for one random day, I went to my French class, like after like a month and a half of not being there. My teacher was very confused. I tried to get back in. I got 3 of my 4 classes expunged from the record, but they needed a clean sweep, and we could not locate the GSI. We could not locate the history teacher to say, yeah, no, he didn't come to class. So I had to go to community college for 2 semesters and then come back. I went from 2005 through 2008, 2004 through 2008. Yeah, 2004 through 2008. Class of 2008, graduated on the Diag, then moved out to Los Angeles, working in the entertainment industry. Edwin Simmons at Simmons_Edwin. Do we land the rookie Bo Jackson? Doesn't feel like it. Feels like he's trending elsewhere. Do you expect Amarian Stewart to play? I saw he was dressed for the spring game, but no reps. I don't know who you're talking about here, because Maran Walker was at Ole Miss. Amarian Stewart, the freshman wide receiver, is not on campus yet. He's a summer enrollee. So I don't know. Bags at Michael Bagsby. Will we struggle with depth this year, and who will be your projected breakout player? I don't know that we'll struggle. I don't know if Michigan will struggle with depth. I think that there's a lot of pieces that could really step up, right? My breakout player is Eno Etta. I think that he is going to be an absolute star on the defensive end, and at defensive end or defensive tackle. He would be my breakout guy. But there's a lot of guys that could really step up. There's a lot of guys that they talk about that sound like they're ready to be that. The only place I'm concerned with depth on is offensive line, just because last year it felt like they could have maybe 3 offensive lines essentially, and now it's like you have your starters, and beyond that, I'm not really sure where they stand. Coming up with a 2 deep was actually kind of hard. John Morris said John has big brain. All of Michigan coaches in the AP era won their first game against Ohio State outside of Jim Harbaugh and Rich Rod. Does last year count for more? Will the trend continue in the fall? hard to say, right? It's going to depend on how does Michigan's new offensive line look, how is its defense, and same thing with Ohio State's. I wouldn't necessarily count. I mean, I do count it as a win for Sharon, but not as like the actual head coach, right? Because now it's his vision. It's his time to really put down the team. Like he's running practice every day. He's the one game planning, all of it. So, yeah, that's all I got there. Snake Plissken at _Snake Plissken _ where the heck is the 2025 class? I mean, it's usually last year was a little bit different that they got it wrapped up. Usually we don't see it coming together till June. So wait and see. Hopefully it's not like 2 years ago where it didn't come together until late and it obviously didn't look good. Wait till June. June's when it's really going to probably pop off. That's how that usually goes for Michigan. Ralph Wolf at Ralph Wolf 1968. If we lost any football transfers we wanted due to admissions like basketball has, not that I know of. Cody Wiseman at Cody Dub 51017. Portal targets. Any more names outside of the CJ West, who I've talked about? I did see that the Texas cornerback was being thrown about by Sam Webb. So they've got their eyes on some guys. I'm not really sure on too many of them. CJ West, I know it was because I've talked to actually someone and they really, really liked him. And then that Texas cornerback name eludes me is certainly in play. Drew Cochran at Andrew Cosgrove 17. In September 1988, coming out of the national championship the previous January, Michigan stumbled out of the blocks, losing their first two games, Notre Dame and Syracuse. How much does Coach Moore keep the guys focused to avoid a similar hangover this fall? I feel like it's partially like Michigan is, I'm not going to say more talented because obviously that was still a talented team in 98. Kind of a lot of similar situations, losing some of your major star players. But I feel like they have a lot of their major star players coming back because a lot of them were sophomores last year. Fresno State's no one to slouch at. I could see them losing to Texas. But it's going to just have to be a focus, come up with a good game plan, and, win game one and go on from there. Take things week by week. Don't look at the schedule as an amalgamate. NB Hunt at NB Hunt 10, who's responsible for these failed attempts at these recruits? How is it possible that we keep losing talent of all people? Kentucky. Michigan's not the only team that loses to Kentucky. Kentucky is long recruited well. It's one of those things. There's always been two schools that Steve Lorenz told me when I started this job, when I left 24/7 Sports to come over here. He said, when evaluating recruiting, if you want to start looking at what recruits are going to be like those next big guys, look at Kentucky and Iowa State because they're on top of it. Like they are in on guys early. Guys like Jacob and Jared Smith, they were from Kentucky originally. So it made sense that they'd flip back to Kentucky after they kind of moved from New England back to Kentucky, right? Kentucky stayed in their ear. Kentucky sometimes they've managed to just be more aggressive on guys like Deion Walker, right? Deion Walker looked like he was probably going to go to Michigan, but Kentucky got in early, stayed aggressive, and managed to get him. So I wouldn't sweat it that much. You're going to lose some every now and again. Carter Carlin at Carter Carl 53947. How is Michigan NIL improving? Will they ever do pay for play? No on the latter, I would imagine, unless things just get really abysmal. I mean, it's improving, and they've got about double the amount in the reward chest than they had last year, but it's still not as much as a lot of other schools, what I would say. Finishing us out, Smoothie at Nick Brownell 02. What position besides wide receiver do you think Michigan still needs to target? Definitely cornerback. I would say quarterback, but like, tell me the quarterback name out there that's going to be there that you're going to want to bring in. It's not going to be. Cornerback with that Texas guy out there, that would be a great one. There's a couple other players that I've seen at corner. I can't remember who. I feel like there was an Arizona State guy, if memory serves. I don't know. I have not paid much attention to recruiting as much in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks when I've seen some of these portal guys hit. But corner would be the one, just because you even though you feel good about Jair Hill probably losing DJ Waller, like, all right, at least make up for that and get a third guy in rotation that's like a surefire guy. That would be what I would do. And maybe the same with linebacker, even though you like, because of Samaj Bridgman moving on. Still got Jimmy Rolder and Jaden Hood, but good thing to add on there. All right, we're way over time, as expected. That's going to do it for today. We're going to talk a little basketball tomorrow, and we'll touch on some football as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. You want to say bye, Zuri? He doesn't. Peace.